She was already going down when he moved. 1 second, Cora was upright, tray in both hands, 8 glasses of water, and a bread basket balanced perfectly the way she'd learned to do it over 4 years of doubles. The next second the room tilted, her knees went soft, and the tray was falling and she was falling and there was nothing to grab. Then there were hands, strong ones, one at her waist, one catching her forearm. And that's when she heard him make a sound. Not loud, almost nothing. Just a sharp intake of breath, the kind that means a person has seen something they weren't expecting. She looked up at his face. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at her arm, at the bruise Danny had left there 11 days ago, the one she'd been covering with her sleeve until the sleeve slipped. The restaurant had gone completely quiet. Who did that to you?" he said. His voice was low, controlled. The kind of controlled that isn't calm. It's something sitting on top of calm, holding it down. Cora opened her mouth. The lie came out automatically. "I fell," she said. Marco Conti looked at her for a long moment. His jaw moved once. "Okay," he said. He didn't believe her. She could tell he didn't believe her. And something about the way he said, "okay," like he was filing the real answer away, somewhere she couldn't see, made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "I need to tell you about Conti's first, because you can't understand what happened that night without understanding the kind of place it was. And the kind of place it was shaped everything, including why a girl like me ended up working there, and why a man like Marco Conti catching me when I fell was not a small thing." Conti's Ristorante sat on the corner of 4th and Garden in Hoboken, New Jersey, the way certain buildings sit, like they grew there instead of being built. Dark green awning, brass door handles worn soft from decades of hands, window boxes with real flowers that Rosa Conti changed with the seasons. Inside, white tablecloths, candles in short glass holders, the smell of garlic and rosemary, and something deeper underneath that I could never name exactly. Old money and older recipes. The kind of restaurant where the food was never written on a specials board because the regulars already knew. I'd been working there 8 months when it happened. Got the job through my friend Becca, who'd waitressed there for 2 years before moving to her cousin's catering company. "It's a good job," she told me. "Good tips, good food, and Rosa runs it like a church. Everybody behaves." She paused. "Just don't ask questions about the back room." I didn't ask questions about the back room. I was 26, recently relocated from my apartment in Jersey City to a smaller, cheaper place in Hoboken, after Danny cleared out my savings account and my dignity in roughly the same week. I needed the money, and I needed to be somewhere busy enough that my own thoughts couldn't get too loud. Conti's gave me both. Rosa Conti was in her early 60s, silver-haired, the kind of woman who made you feel simultaneously welcomed and assessed every time she looked at you. She interviewed me herself at a corner table before the lunch rush, the espresso in front of her, hands folded. She asked about my experience, my availability, whether I had reliable transportation, and then the question I wasn't expecting. "Are you someone who keeps to herself?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. She nodded once. "Good." I was hired. The staff at Conti's were a small, tight crew. Franco, the head waiter, who'd been there since before I was born and moved through the dining room like he owned it, which in certain ways I think he felt he did. B, the hostess, mid-40s, warm with guests, and completely unreadable otherwise. 2 other waitresses, Gina and Penny, who were friendly enough but kept their conversation surface level in the way people do when they've learned that surface level is safer. And Jimmy, the floor manager, You who scheduled our shifts, and handled the nightly close, and had a habit of standing slightly too close when he talked to you. I'd been managing Jimmy for 8 months. Sidestep, redirect, keep moving. It was the same skill set I developed with Danny, which I tried not to think about too hard. The night everything changed was a Thursday in late fall, the kind of cold that came off the Hudson and got into your bones before you even made it from the parking lot to the door. We were 3/4 full, the dinner rush winding down toward the quieter second seating. I had 4 tables. I was tired in the specific deep way that comes from being tired for so long it stops feeling like tiredness and starts feeling like your normal state. I'd worked a double the day before, hadn't eaten since a granola bar at 2 in the afternoon. Now my blood pressure did a thing sometimes when I pushed too hard. My doctor had mentioned it. I'd filed the mention away and kept working. That was mistake 1. Mistake 2 was taking on an extra table when Gina's section got triple-seated. 8 waters, bread basket, heavy tray. I'd done it 100 times, but the room was warm, the tray was heavier than I'd grabbed it, and I stood up from the bread station too fast. And then I was falling. After Marco caught me and the tray went down with a crash that made every head in the dining room turn, the next 60 seconds happened in a blur I've had to piece together from what other people told me later. Franco appeared from nowhere and started collecting glasses. Bay materialized at my elbow with water. Marco had guided me, firmly, carefully, like someone who knew how to move a person without asking them, to the chair across from his at the table he'd been seated alone at. I was upright, breathing. My face was hot, and my hands were shaking slightly, and I wanted very badly to disappear into the floor. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm fine. I just stood up too fast. Drink this." He set a glass of water in front of me, not unkind, just direct. I drank. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read, not irritated, not particularly soft, just focused. The way a person looks when they're paying close attention and not bothering to hide it. I'd seen his photo once, in a frame on Rose's office wall. A younger version, early 20s, arm around an older man I didn't recognize. The Marco in front of me was maybe 32, 33. Dark hair swept back, jaw sharp. In the gray suit, expensive in the quiet way that doesn't announce itself. Both hands visible on the table now, the tattoos starting at his knuckles and disappearing under his cuffs, the kind you didn't ask about. "You work here," he said. Statement, not question. 8 months, I said. "My mother know you were running doubles." I blinked. "How did you? You've got the look." He said it matter-of-factly. "Eat something. Franco." He said the name once, not loud, and Franco was there in 3 seconds. Marco said something to him in Italian, low and fast. Franco disappeared toward the kitchen. I should have stood up, gone back to my tables, thanked him and excused myself, and gotten as far from Marco Conti's attention as the dining room allowed. And instead, I sat there with my water glass and my racing heart and my sleeve still pushed up from when he'd caught me. The bruise was visible. I registered this a second too late. It was bad. I knew it was bad. Danny had grabbed me hard when I'd told him I'd found out about the account. The shape of his fingers was still there in yellow and purple against my forearm, fading, but not gone. Marco's eyes moved to it, stayed there for 2 full seconds. When he looked back up at my face, something had shifted in his expression. The controlled neutral had gotten very still in a way that felt somehow louder than if he'd raised his voice. "Who did that to you?" he said, and I said, I fell, and he said, "Okay." And the way he said it, quiet, final, nay, like a door closing on a decision already made, sent something cold through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. Franco came back with bread and a small bowl of pasta e fagioli that I hadn't asked for. He set it in front of me without ceremony, like this was a normal thing that happened. "Eat," Marco said again. I ate. He watched me for a moment, then picked up his phone and typed something, put it away, picked up his own wine glass, and looked toward the window like the conversation was over, like he'd already moved on. But his jaw was tight in a way that told me he hadn't moved on at all. From the back of the restaurant, through the door that led to the private hallway, I heard the sound of heels on hardwood. Rosa Conti appeared in the dining room doorway, eyes finding her son immediately, then moving to me, and then to my arm. Her face did something careful and controlled. She crossed the room, kissed Marco once on each cheek, sat down across from us, and picked up the menu she already knew by heart. "Cora," she said, without looking up, "take the rest of the evening. Franco will cover your tables." "Mrs. Conti, I really don't need—" "It wasn't a question, sweetheart." She said it warm. Absolute. I looked at Marco. He was looking at his mother. Some kind of communication was happening between them that I didn't have the language for. I pushed back from the table, picked up my tray. Someone had already stacked the unbroken glasses back on it. My hands were steadier now. The soup had helped. "Thank you," I said, to both of them, to the table, to whatever had just happened that I didn't fully understand. Marco didn't look up from his wine. "Nash, get home safe," he said. Outside, the cold hit me like a wall. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, breath coming out in a cloud, the noise of 4th Street surrounding me, a cab, someone laughing down the block, the distant sound of the PATH train. My sleeve was back down. My arm still ached where it shouldn't. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking. Behind me, through the brass door and the thick walls and the white tablecloths, I had no idea what conversation had just started at that corner table. I would find out. The next morning I woke up to a text from an unknown number. 3 words. "Eat before work." I stared at it for a long time. Sitting on the edge of my bed in my apartment on Washington Street, the radiator clanking the way it always did in the cold, my coffee going warm on the nightstand. I didn't respond. I told myself it was probably Franco, or B, someone from the restaurant with a new number who'd gotten mine from the schedule sheet. I told myself that for about 4 hours before I stopped believing it. I ate breakfast, which I didn't usually do. Conti's was closed on Mondays, which gave me a day to exist outside the restaurant and remember that I had a life that didn't revolve around white tablecloths and the smell of garlic. I used Mondays for laundry, groceries, the practical maintenance of a life I was holding together with both hands, and not much else. That Monday I ran into Rosa Conti at the produce market on Washington. This was not unusual. Rosa did her own shopping, always had, which I'd always found interesting for a woman who ran a restaurant. She said once, to no one in particular, and that she didn't trust anyone else to pick a tomato. I believed her. She was examining fennel when I came around the corner with my basket. She looked up, unsurprised. "Cora." She said my name the way she always did, warm, like she'd been expecting me. "How are you feeling?" "Much better," I said. "I'm sorry again about last night." "Stop apologizing." She put the fennel in her basket, picked up another bunch, considered it, put it back. "Are you eating properly?" "Getting better at it." She made a sound that wasn't quite a word, moved to the tomatoes. I should have kept moving, finished my shopping, said goodbye, maintained the professional distance that made working for someone's family manageable. Instead, I stood there. "Mrs. Conti," I said, "the man at the table last night, my son." She said it simply, eyes still on the tomatoes. Is he, will he be around the restaurant? I just want to make sure I didn't." "You didn't." She picked up a tomato, pressed it gently with her thumb, set it in her basket. Then she looked at me directly for the first time since I'd come around the corner. "Marco came home 3 days ago. He'll be around for a while." A pause. "He's a good man, Cora, whatever you may hear otherwise." I didn't know what I'd heard otherwise exactly, just pieces, the kind of things that floated around a restaurant like Conti's if you listened at the right angle. The back room, the men who came in and ordered nothing and left after 20 minutes. The phone calls Rosa took standing up. I nodded. "Good," she said, like I'd agreed to something. She patted my arm, the unbruised one, I noticed, and moved down the aisle. I stood by the tomatoes for a moment after she left. Something about the conversation felt like the beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. Over the next 2 weeks, Marco was at the restaurant most evenings. Not eating, always. Sometimes he was in the back, in the room I didn't ask about, for an hour or two before coming to sit at what had quietly become his table. Corner of the dining room, good sight lines to the door, close enough to his mother's office to hear if she called. Franco always had his espresso ready when he sat down. The staff moved around him the way water moves around a rock, naturally, without making it a thing. I moved around him too, professionally. Eyes on my section, tray balanced. The particular focus of a waitress who is very aware of someone without looking at them. On the fourth night, I was refilling water at the table next to his when he spoke. "You ate today." I looked up. He was reading something on his phone. Hadn't looked at me. "Excuse me." "You've got more color than last week." He set his phone down then, looked at me directly. "It's a good thing." My grip tightened slightly on the water pitcher. "I wasn't aware you were keeping track." "I'm not." The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Not quite. "How's the arm?" "Fine." "Good." He picked his phone back up. Conversation apparently over. I refilled the water at the next table and went back to my section and spent the following 20 minutes being more aware of exactly where he was in the room than I had any professional reason to be. The thing about Danny was that I'd spent a long time making his behavior make sense. That's not an excuse. It's just what I did. Danny Kowalski had been my boyfriend for 2 years, charming at the start, the way certain people are charming, the kind that feels specific to you, like you're the only one who gets to see it. He was funny and unpredictable, and when things were good, they were genuinely good, the kind of good that made you willing to explain away the other parts. The other parts got worse over time. That's also just what I did. I didn't see it happening, because it happened slowly, 1 degree at a time, until one morning I woke up and didn't recognize the way I moved through my own apartment. Careful, quiet, measuring his mood before I measured my words. When I found out about the savings account, all of it gone, transferred out over 3 months in amount small enough not to trigger alerts, I confronted him. So that was the night of the bruise. He grabbed my arm when I tried to leave the room. I left anyway. I filed a report, got a lawyer, learned that recovering the money was technically possible and practically very slow. I got the job at Conti's, and I kept moving because moving was the only thing I knew how to do. I hadn't told anyone at the restaurant any of this. It wasn't their business. It wasn't something I talked about, period. Not because I was ashamed exactly, but because saying it out loud made it real in a way I could only handle in small doses. But Marco Conti had seen my arm and asked one question, and somehow that felt like more than the police report and the lawyer and the carefully neutral conversations with my mother ever had. I didn't know what to do with that. On a Wednesday night, 3 weeks after I fainted, the restaurant was slow enough that Franco let two of us take a break at the same time. I was in the small staff room at the back, coat on, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, feet aching in the particular way they did around hour 7 of a shift, when Marco appeared in the doorway. He looked at the two chairs, looked at me, raised an eyebrow. "I can go," I said. "Stay." He came in, poured himself a coffee from the pot on the counter, stayed standing. The staff room was not large. Slow night. Tuesdays and Wednesdays usually are. "You always pick up extra shifts?" "When they're available." He was quiet for a moment. The coffee maker dripped. Somewhere in the kitchen, someone dropped something metal and swore in Italian. "Where are you from originally?" he asked. "Bayonne," I said. "You?" "Here." A pause. "And elsewhere?" For a while." I didn't ask about elsewhere. He seemed to notice that I didn't ask. "Most people ask," he said. "I figure you'd tell me if you wanted me to know." He looked at me over his coffee cup. Something shifted in his expression, not quite the almost smile from before. Something more considered. "Danny Kowalski," he said. My coffee cup stopped, halfway to my mouth. "Jersey City address currently. Works dispatch for a freight company in Secaucus." He said it the way he'd say the weather. Flat, informational. "The account he emptied was joint. Your lawyer's going after it in civil court, which takes time." The room was very quiet. "How do you know that?" I said. I looked. "You?" I set my cup down. My hands were not entirely steady. "Mr. Conti, you can't just—" "Marco." He said it simply. Say like the correction was the most natural thing in the world. "And I can. I did." He looked at his coffee. "You're not going to get your money back through civil court in any timeline that helps you. The account's been moved twice since he emptied it." The air in the staff room felt different than it had 60 seconds ago, smaller somehow, more loaded. "Why are you telling me this?" I said. He looked at me then, directly, the way he had in the dining room when he'd asked, "Who hurt me?" Like he was saying something underneath the words he was actually saying. "Because you should know what you're dealing with," he said. "And what am I dealing with?" A beat. "A man who thinks there are no consequences," Marco said, "for what he took and what he did to your arm." My throat was tight. I kept my voice even. "I handled it." "You reported it," he said. "That's not the same thing." I didn't answer, because he wasn't wrong, and I knew he wasn't wrong, and admitting that felt like handing something over that I wasn't sure I was ready to hand over. Marco finished his coffee, set the cup on the counter, straightened his jacket. "I'm not going to do anything you don't want me to do," he said. "I want to be clear about that." "Okay," I said carefully. "But if you decide you want things handled differently—" He moved toward the door, stopped in the doorway, back half-turned. "You know where I am," he walked out. I sat in the staff room for another 4 minutes. The coffee maker dripped. The kitchen noise continued. My shift still had 2 hours left. I picked up my cup, finished my coffee, stood up. What he just offered was not something I could think about clearly right now. I knew that. So I filed it in the place where I kept things I wasn't ready to look at, put my professional face back on, and walked back out into the dining room. But I thought about it. For the rest of the night, I thought about it. The thing I didn't expect was how normal it became. not the situation. The situation was not normal. A man with tattoos on his knuckles and a back room in his family's restaurant, knowing my ex-boyfriend's current address, was objectively not normal. I was clear-eyed about that. But Marco, at his corner table every evening, Franco's espresso appearing without being ordered, Rosa stopping by my section sometimes just to ask how I was eating. The particular rhythm of Conti's that had already felt like something close to safe before Marco came back, and now felt like something I didn't have an exact word for. That part started to feel normal, and normal was something I hadn't had in a long time. It was a Friday night, the restaurant full, every table turned twice, the kind of controlled chaos that made the hours disappear. When Jimmy cornered me near the wait station, I say cornered because that's what it was. He'd gotten good at it over 8 months. Always plausible. Always just close enough, just long enough to make the point without making it something I could formally object to. "You're taking Table 9's dessert order," he said, standing between me and the path back to the floor. Close. Too close. "That's Gina's table," I said. "Gina's in the weeds. You're taking it." "Okay." I moved to go around him. His hand came down on the wait station counter, blocking the gap. "Hey." Lower now. "You've been avoiding me." "I've been working, Jimmy." "Don't do that." His voice had the particular edge it got when he felt like he wasn't being taken seriously. "I'm just making conversation. I have tables. They can wait 30 seconds. My jaw was tight. I kept my voice even, the same way I'd learned to keep it even with Danny, which I hated noticing. "Move, Jimmy, please." He didn't move. "Everything okay here?" The voice came from behind me, low, unhurried. Jimmy's hand came off the counter. I turned. Marco was standing 3 feet away, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the forearm, holding what looked like paperwork. He wasn't looking at Jimmy with anything dramatic, no raised voice, no visible anger. He was just looking at him the way you look at something you're deciding what to do with. That look was somehow worse than anything loud would have been. "Mr. Conti." Jimmy straightened. "Just going over the floor assignments." "I know what you were doing." Marco said it quiet, final. "Go check on the kitchen." Jimmy went. I stood there for a second. The wait station hummed. The dining room noise continued around us like nothing had happened, because for everyone else, nothing had. "Thank you," I said. Kept my voice professional. It cost me something. Marco looked at me for a moment. "Has he done that before?" "I handle it." "Cora." "I handle it," I said again, more firmly than I meant to. He studied me, didn't push. "Okay." He walked back toward the back hallway. I picked up my tray, took Table 9's dessert order, and did the last 2 hours of my shift with the particular focus of someone using work to keep their thoughts from getting loud. But my hands were steadier than they'd been in months, and I couldn't entirely explain why. 2 nights later, Marco was at his corner table when the restaurant had emptied down to the last table finishing dessert. I was doing side work, rolling silverware, the late shift wind down, when he said, without preamble, "Tell me something true." I looked up. "About what?" "Anything." He was leaning back in his chair, espresso in front of him, jacket draped over the chair back, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen him before. "You've been working here 8 months. I know what you order for staff meal. I know you take your break at 9:15 when the rush breaks. I don't know anything real about you." I kept rolling silverware. "You know about the account, and Danny. That's real. That's what happened to you. That's not who you are." I stopped rolling. He waited. Something about the distinction. What happened to you versus who you are landed somewhere I hadn't been expecting. I put down the silverware. I wanted to be a teacher, I said. Elementary school. I did a year of the education program at Keene before I ran out of money and couldn't make the numbers work. I paused. I still think about finishing it sometimes. Why don't you? Because finishing it costs money I don't currently have. I said it without bitterness, just the fact of it. Why did you come back? You were gone 2 years. Rosa doesn't talk about it. My father asked me to come back. Your father's not here. Something moved across his face, quick, then gone. No, he's not. I hadn't known that. I thought about the photo on Rosa's wall, the older man, Marco's arm around him. I'm sorry, I said. It was a year ago. He picked up his espresso. He built this place from nothing, came from Naples with $400 and an uncle who owed him a favor. 40 years later, he gestured at the room. Not grandly, just indicating it. Everything you see. That's something to protect, I said. He looked at me. Yes. The last table signed their check. Franco moved through the dining room, doing his closing circuit. The restaurant settled into its end-of-night quiet. Chairs pushed in, candles burning low. The smell of coffee and something sweet from the kitchen. The education program, Marco said. Keene University? Why? Just asking. I pointed at him with a rolled napkin. You're going to look it up. The almost smile again, fuller this time. It did something to his face. Made him look younger, less contained. Maybe. Marco. I said his name, and then wasn't sure what I'd meant to say after it. He waited. The thing you offered, I said carefully. About Danny. I've been thinking about it. The almost smile didn't disappear exactly. It just went somewhere more serious. And? I don't want him hurt. I was clear about that. I want my money back. I want him to face what he actually did. I don't want, I paused. I don't want something I'm going to feel complicated about later. Marco was quiet for a moment. Nah, that's fair. Can you do it that way? He looked at me steadily. I can make his life significantly more inconvenient until returning your money becomes the easiest option available to him. A beat. No one gets hurt. You promise? I don't make promises I'm not sure I can keep. He said it simply. But that's my intention. It was the most honest answer he could have given me. I recognized that. I nodded, picked the silverware back up. Cora. His voice was different, softer at the edges. I looked up. The arm, he said. How is it, actually? My sleeve was down. Had been down all night. I didn't know how he was still thinking about it. Healed, I said. It's healed. He nodded slowly, like he was registering that and something else underneath it at the same time. Good, he said. Over the next week, things happened that I was not directly told about. I only know this because of small things I noticed. Danny's lawyer sent a letter to my lawyer, suddenly, without the usual delay, indicating a willingness to discuss settlement. My landlord, who had been dragging his feet on a heat issue for 2 months, fixed it within 48 hours after a man I didn't recognize came to look at the boiler and left without charging anything. Marco never mentioned any of it. I never asked. We existed in this careful space, professional on the floor, something more honest in the quiet moments when the restaurant emptied. He told me about Naples, about the 2 years abroad he'd spent learning things he only described as the parts of the business my father wanted me to understand. I told him about my sister in Pennsylvania, about the way our mother made Sunday gravy every week, regardless of what else was happening, about the teacher I'd had in 4th grade who'd made me love reading in a way nothing had undone. Mrs. Farrell, I said, one night, at the staff table after close. She used to read out loud to us after lunch, every day. Never skipped it, even when we had tests. She said the story was the point. What was she reading when you left for the summer? I smiled before I could stop myself. Charlotte's Web. We never found out how it ended in class. A pause. I read it alone at home and cried for an hour. Marco's expression did something I hadn't seen it do before. Open, a little unguarded, like a window coming up in a room that had been closed for a long time. "I'll tell you something true," he said. I looked at him. "I haven't eaten a meal at that corner table alone since I was 12 years old." He said it matter-of-factly. "My father and I used to sit there on Sunday mornings before service, just us. He'd tell me about Naples, about his father." A pause. I came back to sit there because it felt like the closest I could get. The staff room was quiet. The kitchen had gone dark. Somewhere outside, a car passed on 4th Street. "I think he'd like knowing you still go there," I said. Marco looked at his coffee. His jaw was tight for just a second, then released. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe." I watched his face in the low light of the staff room and felt something shift in my chest. Careful and warm and frightening in the way that good things are frightening when you've spent a long time not having them. I looked away first. The trouble started on a Thursday. I know because Thursdays were when Jimmy did the weekly schedule, posted it in the staff room by 4 shifts for the following week. I checked it at the start of my shift and felt my stomach drop. He'd cut my hours. 4 shifts down to 2, no explanation, the worst 2 of the week, Sunday lunch and Tuesday midday, when the tips barely covered gas. I stood in the staff room looking at the schedule for a long moment. Then I went and found Franco. "Did you see the new schedule?" I asked. Franco's face did something careful. "I saw it." "Did Rosa approve it?" A pause. "Jimmy does the schedule." Franco. He looked at me, a long, measured look. "I would speak to Mrs. Conti directly," he said finally, "before the end of tonight." I nodded. Went back to the floor. I didn't get the chance to speak to Rosa before the end of tonight. Because at 8:15, Jimmy called me into his office, a small room off the back hallway, between the storage and the back room I didn't ask about, and told me that my performance had been inconsistent and he was restructuring the floor team. "Inconsistent how?" I said. "The feigning incident." He said it like it was a file he'd been building. "Guest complaints about slow service on your section." He looked at a paper on his desk that I couldn't read from where I stood. "I'm giving you 2 shifts for the next month. Probationary." My throat was tight. 2 shifts. I couldn't pay rent on 2 shifts. "I'd like to speak with Mrs. Conti," I said. "Mrs. Conti delegates staffing to me. Then I'd like this in writing." Something crossed his face. Irritation. It quickly controlled. "That's not how we do things here, Cora." "I'd still like it in writing." He stood up from his desk. Not fast. Slow, deliberate, using his height the way men did when they wanted you to feel the difference. I kept my feet planted. My hands were cold. My chest was tight. "You've been spending a lot of time talking to Marco Conti," he said. Different tone now. Lower. My stomach dropped. "That's not just an observation." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I think you should be careful about who you think is looking out for you here. Marco's been gone 2 years. He doesn't know how things run." The door was behind me, 8 feet. "I'm going back to my tables," I said. I turned and walked out before he could respond. Down the back hallway, past the storage, off through the kitchen door, and out into the dining room, noise and light, and the familiar smell of the restaurant. which had never felt more like something I might lose. At his corner table, Marco was looking at his phone. He looked up when I came through. Read my face in 1 second flat. I shook my head slightly. Not here. He held my gaze for a moment, nodded once. I went back to my tables, did my job, kept my face even and my hands steady and my head clear. But something had just gotten complicated in a way that was going to force decisions I'd been putting off. Jimmy knew about Marco and me, whatever Marco and me was, and Jimmy, I was starting to understand, had his own relationship with this restaurant, and his own reasons for not wanting it disrupted. I found out what Jimmy was on a Sunday, not from Marco, not from Rosa, from B, on the hostess, who had worked at Conti's for 11 years and knew where every body was buried. Figuratively, I told myself, though by that point I wasn't entirely sure. It was after the lunch service, the restaurant quiet between seatings, and B was counting her reservation book at the front stand, when I came to refill the bread station nearby. We'd never talked much, surface level, like I said, but she looked up at me with an expression that had something decided in it, like she'd been weighing something for a while and had finally put it down on one side. "You know what Jimmy does on Tuesday nights?" she said. No preamble. I looked at her. No. "He goes to the back room." She said it simply, eyes back on her reservation book. Not for a meeting, not for family business. He goes to deliver something. She turned a page. "Has been for about 8 months. 8 months. Since before I started." "Deliver what?" I said. "Information." She closed the reservation book. "About who comes in, who sits in the back, who meets with who." She straightened the pen next to the book with one finger. "There's a man named Gerald Fitch. He runs a competing operation out of Bayonne. He's been trying to get eyes inside this restaurant for 2 years. She finally looked at me. Jimmy is those eyes. The bread station was very still. "Does Rosa know?" I said. "Rosa suspects." A pause. "She doesn't have proof yet." "Why are you telling me?" B looked at me for a long moment. Her face was unreadable in the particular way of someone who has decided exactly how much to say and is not going to say more. "Because Jimmy cutting your hours wasn't about your performance," she said. "Yes, and you deserve to know that." She picked up her reservation book and walked to the other end of the host stand. Conversation over. I finished filling the bread station, walked back to the floor, set up my 2 remaining afternoon tables with the automatic movements of someone whose hands knew the job while their brain was somewhere else entirely. Jimmy was delivering information to Gerald Fitch. Had been for 8 months. And when Marco came back and started sitting at the corner table and talking to me after close, Jimmy had gotten nervous, because whatever Marco was starting to handle quietly, whatever pressure he was applying from the direction of Danny Kowalski and my landlord and the small machinery of inconvenience he'd set in motion, it was visible enough to someone watching closely, and Jimmy had cut my hours to send a message. Not to me, to Marco. I didn't go to Marco directly. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't caution exactly, and it wasn't that I doubted what Bia had told me. It was that going to Marco with this information felt like a line I'd been standing at the edge of for weeks, and crossing it meant something I needed to be clear about before I crossed it. Because up until now I could tell myself I was just a waitress at his family's restaurant. That the staff room conversations were just 2 people talking. That the careful warmth of the last few weeks was just what it looked like when someone was kind to you after a long stretch of nobody being kind. Taking B's information to Marco meant I was choosing a side. and choosing a side in something I only half understood had consequences I couldn't fully map. I thought about it for 2 days. Then on Tuesday, I knocked on the door of the back office, Rosa's office, not Jimmy's, and Rosa said come in, and I came in and sat down across from her desk and told her everything Bea had told me. Rosa listened without interrupting. Her hands were folded on the desk. Her face was doing the careful, controlled thing it did when she was thinking hard behind a neutral expression. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Thank you, Cora," she said. "I thought you should know, or Bea said you suspected, but I thought you thought correctly." She looked at me steadily. "Can I ask why you came to me first, before Marco?" I looked at my hands. "Because it's your restaurant," I said, "and because I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing for the right reasons." Something shifted in Rosa's expression. Warm, brief, and then back to composed. "You're a good woman," she said. It wasn't flattery. She said it the way she stated facts, plain and without decoration. "What will you do?" I asked. "What needs to be done?" She stood, which was a signal. "Your hours will be corrected by end of day. Whatever Jimmy told you about your performance." That was not a conversation I authorized. I stood. "Okay. Cora." She stopped me at the door. "Marco is going to find out about this. Not from me, but he will. When he does, I want you to be honest with him about what you know." She paused. "He needs people in his life who deal straight. He doesn't have as many of those as he should." I nodded, walked out. In the hallway, the sound of the kitchen hummed through the walls. Prep for the evening service already underway. The smell of sofrito and something roasting low and slow. The ordinary machinery of the restaurant doing what it did every day, while underneath it, something else had been running that nobody talked about. I thought about Danny, about the way bad things got comfortable when you let them run long enough without naming them. I thought about my schedule. 2 shifts, the rent due in 9 days. I thought about Marco at his corner table, espresso going cold while he read something on his phone, and the way he'd looked up when I came through the kitchen door with something wrong on my face and read it in 1 second flat. I went back to work. Marco found out that same night. I don't know who told him, not Rosa like she said, maybe Franco, maybe someone else in the web of quiet loyalties that held Conti's together. It didn't matter. What mattered was that at 9:45, when the dining room had thinned to 2 tables and I was at the wait station rolling silverware, Marco came through the back hallway door and went directly to Jimmy's office. I know this because Franco materialized beside me at the wait station 30 seconds later and said, very quietly, "Keep your guests comfortable. This will take a few minutes." It took 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock above the bar without meaning to. My hands kept rolling silverware. My 2 remaining tables got their checks, signed them, left. Franco dimmed the front lights in the way he did at end of service. At 9:56, Jimmy came out of the back hallway with his jacket over his arm and his face the color of old concrete. He walked through the dining room without looking at anyone. The front door opened and closed. He didn't come back. Marco came through the hallway door 2 minutes later. He looked at me across the empty dining room. Just looked for a moment in the way he did when he was saying something without words. Then he went to his corner table and sat down. I finished the silverware, told the last busser he could go, walked to the corner table and stood across from Marco with a water pitcher because I needed something to do with my hands. "Sit down," he said. I sat down, set the pitcher on the table. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not physically. Something deeper. The kind of tired that comes from having to do necessary things you take no pleasure in. "You went to my mother," he said. "Yes." "Before you came to me." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "Why?" I told him what I'd told Rosa. His jaw moved when I said the part about wanting to do the right thing for the right reasons. Not reaction exactly. More like he was registering something. "B told you," he said, "yes. She's been watching him for 3 months." He looked at the table. My mother had the same information. Neither of them had enough to move on until now. He looked up. "Until you. I didn't do anything except pass on what B told me." "You came forward," he said. "That's not nothing. People who have something to lose don't always do that." My throat was tight. "What happens now? With Jimmy and this Fitch person?" "That's being handled." "Marco." "It's being handled in a way that doesn't touch you," he said. "Direct. Clear." "That's what I can tell you." I looked at him across the table. The candle between us had burned low. A warm light in the empty restaurant. Outside, 4th Street was doing its late-night thing. Quiet, a few cars, someone's music from somewhere down the block. "Your hours will be back to full starting next week," he said, "with a raise. You've been underpaid since you started." Franco confirmed it. "Marco, you don't have to. It's not charity." He said it simply. "It's correct. There's a difference." I looked at the candle. He looked at me. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Yeah." "The things you've been doing. For me. Danny, the landlord. Now Jimmy." I kept my voice steady. "What do you want in return?" The question sat on the table between us. Honest and necessary and slightly frightening. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that I thought he might deflect. Or give me something smooth and reassuring that didn't actually answer it. He didn't. "Nothing," he said. "You don't owe me anything." He held my gaze. "But I want to keep talking to you after close, if that's something you want." My chest did something complicated. "That's it," I said. "That's it." I looked at him, at the tiredness in his face and the steadiness underneath it, at the hands folded on the table between us, at the corner table that had been his father's before it was his. "Okay," I said quietly. Something in his expression, just for a second, came open. Not the almost smile. Something quieter and less practiced than that. He picked up his espresso cup, found it empty. "I'll get you another one," I said. I stood up, walked to the coffee station. My hands were warm. My chest was still doing the complicated thing. Behind me, the restaurant was quiet and still and full of the particular weight of everything that had just shifted. I didn't know yet what was coming, but I knew. Making Marco's espresso in the empty restaurant at 10 o'clock at night with the candle burning low at his corner table, that I had crossed the line I'd been standing at for weeks, and that I didn't want to go back to the other side. What I didn't know was that Danny had been watching the restaurant for 3 days. I found out later, much later, that he'd connected my new job to the Conti name through someone he knew in Jersey City. That he'd driven past twice, seen the green awning, and started putting things together in the particular way that men like Danny did when they felt something slipping out of their control, and that the letter his lawyer had sent, the sudden willingness to negotiate, had not been genuine. That Danny Kowalski had made a phone call to Gerald Fitch, and that Gerald Fitch, freshly without his eyes inside Conti's, was now considerably more interested in the waitress at the corner table than he had been before. I found out about Danny on a Wednesday morning. Not from Marco. Not from Rosa. From my own phone at 7:14, sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee still brewing and the radiator doing its clanking thing and the pale winter light coming through the window at the angle that made my apartment look smaller than it was. The text was from an unknown number, different from the one that had told me to eat before work. That one I'd eventually saved under a name I didn't examine too closely. This one was new. You should know who you're working for. Then a link. I stared at it for a long time. The coffee maker beeped. Steam rose from the pot. I clicked the link. It was a news article. Old, several years back. A local New Jersey outlet. The kind of publication that covered things the bigger papers didn't pick up. The headline was about a federal investigation into organized crime activity in Hudson County. There were names in the article. One of them was Conti, not Marco, his father. I set my phone down, picked it up, read it again. The article was careful, the kind of careful that meant a lawyer had read it before it published. Nothing was stated directly. Words like alleged and believed to be connected, and sources familiar with the investigation. The investigation had apparently concluded without charges. Here there was a quote from a lawyer I didn't recognize, saying his client had fully cooperated and the matter was resolved. The matter was resolved. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. Here is what I knew. I already knew Conti's was not a simple restaurant. I had known that since B's first day instruction to not ask about the back room. I had known it in the way the staff moved around certain conversations, in the men who came in and ordered nothing, in the fact that Jimmy had been feeding information to a competing operation for 8 months, and the consequence had been 11 quiet minutes, and a man walking out with his jacket over his arm. I had known all of that, and I had chosen, deliberately, with my eyes open, to step closer rather than further away. But seeing it in print did something different. Ace made it concrete in a way that the restaurant's quiet signals hadn't. This was real. Whatever the Conti family was, whatever the back room contained, whatever handled meant when Marco said it. It was real and documented, and I was a waitress from Bayonne who had been eating staff meals at their table and making espresso at 10 o'clock at night and letting myself feel things I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. I thought about my mother, about my sister in Pennsylvania, about the education program at Keene I still thought about finishing. I thought about Danny, about what it had felt like to find the savings account empty and understand that I had trusted someone who had been lying to my face for 3 months. Was this the same thing? I didn't know. That was the honest answer. I didn't know. And not knowing felt like standing on something I'd believed was solid and feeling it shift under my feet. I called in sick for the first time since I'd started at Conti's. Brianna, Franco's daughter, who handled the scheduling calls, said, "Feel better," without asking questions. I hung up and sat on my couch in my coat because I'd put it on to go to work, and then sat back down and hadn't taken it off. My phone had 3 texts from Marco's number by noon. The first, Franco said you called in. You okay? The second, an hour later, Cora. The third, 2 hours after that. I know about the article. Call me when you're ready. I stared at the third one for a long time. He knew. Of course he knew. Whoever had sent me that link had probably sent something to him too. Or he had his own way of knowing when things moved in his direction. When the idea that I could process this in private, get my thoughts in order, decide what I believed before I had to say it out loud to him, that was gone now. I put my phone face down on the couch cushion. The apartment was very quiet. The radiator had stopped clanking. Outside, Hoboken was doing its midday Wednesday thing. A delivery truck somewhere, a dog, kids on lunch from the school 2 blocks over. I thought about what B had said. He needs people who deal straight. I thought about what Marco had said. Nothing. You don't owe me anything. I thought about Rosa in the produce market, pressing a tomato with her thumb. He's a good man, Cora, whatever you may hear otherwise. And I thought about the article, alleged, believed to be connected. The matter was resolved. And here was the thing I kept coming back to. The article was about his father, who was dead, who had come from Naples with $400 and built something over 40 years that his son had come back to protect. Whatever that thing contained, whatever the back room held, it had also held Sunday morning espresso at a corner table, and a mother who changed the window boxes with the seasons, and a man who moved through a dining room like water around a rock and asked a girl he barely knew who had hurt her. I wasn't naive. I knew the world didn't divide cleanly into good and bad, that complicated people did real damage, that love for your family didn't cancel out the harm you caused outside it. But I also knew what Danny looked like. I knew what harm in a person's eyes looked like up close. And it didn't look like Marco Conti at his corner table, tired, telling me he wanted nothing except to keep talking. I picked up my phone. I called him. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey," he said. Just that. "I got an article," I said. "I know." Danny sent it. "Someone working with Fitch sent it. Danny gave them your number." A pause. "I should have told you that was a possibility. I'm sorry I didn't." I hadn't expected the apology. It landed differently than I was prepared for. "The article," I said. "Your father." "Yeah." It said the investigation was resolved. It was. His voice was steady. "My father cooperated fully. There were no charges because there was nothing that rose to the level they needed. He was connected to people, yes. He did business in ways that weren't always clean, yes." A pause. He also fed half the neighborhood out of that kitchen for 40 years and put 6 kids from the block through college and never once asked for anything back. I was quiet. "I'm not asking you to be okay with all of it," Marco said. "I'm telling you the truth. You can do what you want with it." "What do you do?" I said. "With the parts that are complicated." A long pause. "I try to do better than what came before," he said. "That's the honest answer. I can't undo what my father built, or how he built it. I can decide what it looks like going forward." Another pause. "That's what I came back to do." The apartment was still quiet. My coat was still on. "Danny's been watching the restaurant," I said. 3 days, we know." "And Fitch, also being handled." His voice was careful now. "Cora, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Don't come in tonight." My chest tightened. "What's happening tonight?" "Nothing that involves you. But I want you not there while it's happening." A pause. "Stay home. Lock your door. I'll call you when it's done." "Marco." "Please." The word came out different from how he usually spoke. Stripped of the controlled surface, just the thing underneath. "I will explain everything tomorrow. I just need to know you're not in that building tonight." My throat was tight. My hands were cold. "Okay," I said. "Thank you." "Marco." I stopped. Wasn't sure what I was going to say. "I know," he said quietly, like he already knew what was underneath the word I hadn't found yet. "I know. I stayed home. I cooked. Not because I was hungry, but because I needed to do something with my hands. Pasta. The simple kind. The way my mother made it on weeknights when she'd been on her feet all day and didn't have energy for anything complicated. Olive oil, garlic, red pepper flakes, a handful of parsley. The smell of it filled my apartment and made it feel less empty. I ate standing at the counter, watched the street from my window, thought about all the things I didn't know and all the things I did. My phone rang at 11:42. "It's done," Marco said. "Everyone's okay." "What happened?" Danny came to the restaurant. He had 2 people with him, associates of Fitch. They were planning to... He stopped. It doesn't matter what they were planning. They were met by people who made the situation very clear. His voice was controlled and even. "Danny signed the settlement agreement tonight. Your money will be back in your account within 72 hours, all of it." My legs went unreliable. I sat down on the kitchen floor without planning to, back against the cabinet, phone pressed to my ear. "All of it." "He won't come near you again," Marco said. "Fitch has also been made aware that his interest in Conti's is no longer welcome. That situation is finished." I couldn't speak for a moment. My chest was full of something that didn't have a clean name, relief and grief and gratitude and something else, something I'd been keeping at arm's length for weeks, that was no longer staying where I'd put it. "Cora." His voice was gentler now. The controlled surface was down. "You still there?" "Yeah." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "I'm here. I should have told you more, kept you more informed. I handled it the way I handle things, and I didn't think enough about what it would feel like from where you were standing." A pause. "I'm sorry." 2 apologies in one day. From a man who I suspected didn't give them easily. "Are you okay?" I said. "You personally." A beat of silence. "Yeah," he said. "I'm okay." "Tell me something true," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, quietly, like it cost him something. "I was afraid tonight. Not for myself." A pause. "For you." The kitchen floor was cold through my jeans. The pasta pot was still on the stove. My apartment smelled like garlic and parsley, and the ordinary evening I'd cooked to keep myself from falling apart. "Come in tomorrow," he said. "If you want to. If you're ready." "I'll be there," I said. "Okay." A pause. "Eat breakfast first." A sound came out of me, small and startled. Almost a laugh. "Yeah," I said. "I will." I sat on the kitchen floor for a while, after we hung up. Not falling apart, just sitting. Letting the night settle around me, letting the weight of the last several weeks find its level. All of it. 72 hours. I thought about the version of me from 8 months ago. The one who'd taken a job at Conti's because she needed the money and somewhere busy enough that her thoughts couldn't get loud. The one who'd been covering a bruise with her sleeve and filing things in the place where she kept things she wasn't ready to look at. That version of me had walked into a restaurant and fainted and told a man she'd fallen. He'd said okay. And then he'd spent weeks proving, quietly and without announcement, that he was the kind of person who noticed what you were carrying. I looked at my arm. The bruise was gone. Had been for weeks. Something else was gone, too. The particular posture of a person who has been bracing for a long time. Shoulders up, chest tight, the low-grade readiness for the next thing that goes wrong. I breathed in, breathed out. On the stove, the pasta water had gone cold. I got up off the floor, washed the pot, turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow I'd go back to Conti's. I'd put on my uniform and tie my apron and carry my tray and do my job. And after close, at the corner table with the low candle and the late-night quiet, I'd sit across from Marco Conti and tell him something true. I wasn't sure yet what it would be. but I knew it would be honest, and I knew he'd be listening. That was enough to stand on. I ate breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, the orange juice I kept buying and not drinking because mornings were usually too rushed for anything that required a glass. I sat at my kitchen table in the early light and ate slowly, without my phone, without the news, without the particular noise I usually filled mornings with to keep my own thoughts from getting too loud. It was the first breakfast I'd eaten sitting down in longer than I could remember. The radiator had stopped its clanking. The super had finally fixed something in the building system. A small victory in the quiet war of my apartment. Outside, Hoboken was doing its Thursday morning thing. A woman walking a dog. 2 kids on bikes. A delivery truck idling at the corner with its hazards on. The driver unhurried, moving at the pace of someone who knew his route cold. I watched all of it from my kitchen window and let it be ordinary. Then I got dressed, tied my hair back, put on my pearl earrings, the small ones my mother had given me for my 21st birthday. Not a special occasion earring, just the ones I wore when I wanted to feel like myself, and walked to work. Conti's looked the same from the outside. Dark green awning, brass door handles, Rosa's window boxes with the late fall arrangements she'd put in. Small evergreen sprigs, white berries, the kind of thing that looks simple and had clearly been thought about. The restaurant didn't know anything dramatic had happened the night before. Buildings didn't carry events the way people did. I pushed through the brass door. Franco was at the wait station doing his opening setup. He looked up when I came in, and something in his expression, careful, warm, relieved, told me he knew more about last night than he'd been told directly. "Cora," he said, "good to see you." "Good to be here," I said, and meant it in a way that surprised me slightly. I tied my apron, started my section setup, the familiar rhythm of it, tables checked, silverware aligned, water glasses polished, settled something in my chest, the way routine does when you've been through something unroutine. Gina came in 10 minutes after me, then Penny, then the kitchen staff in their particular order, and the restaurant came to life around me the way it did every morning, layer by layer, until it was the full breathing thing it became when all its parts were moving. Rosa appeared from her office at 9:15. She came directly to my section. He stood across the table I was setting and looked at me with the direct, assessing look that had intimidated me at my interview and now felt like something else entirely. "How are you?" she said. "Good," I said. "Really good, actually." She nodded once, looked at my face for a moment longer, checking something, finding it. "Marco will be in for dinner tonight." "Okay. He'd like to talk to you after close." She paused. "If you're willing." "I'm willing," I said. Another nod. She touched my arm, the right one, the healed one, briefly, the way she had in the market that day. Then she turned and walked back toward her office, and the day opened up in front of me, ordinary and full and mine. The dinner service was busy in the good way, the way where the hours moved without dragging, where the rhythm of the floor carried you through, where you went home, tired, in a way that felt earned instead of depleted. I had 4 tables. I knew all their orders before they finished reading the menu. Table 3 tipped 40% because the grandfather was celebrating his birthday, and I'd remembered, from a reservation note, that he liked his espresso with a small glass of water and brought it without being asked. Franco caught my eye across the dining room when the grandfather shook my hand on the way out. Just a look, the kind that meant good work. I felt it land the way good things land, when you're not bracing against everything. Marco came in at 8. I was at the wait station when he walked through the door. He was in a dark jacket, no tie, the kind of dressed down that was still entirely put together. He looked different from last night on the phone. Settled. Like something had been resolved in him the same way it had been resolving in me. He glanced at me across the dining room, held it for a second. I nodded once. He went to his corner table. Franco had the espresso there in 3 minutes. By 10 o'clock, the restaurant was down to one table. A couple lingering over dessert, in no hurry, the comfortable pace of two people who had nowhere else to be. I refilled their water, left them to it, and started my closing side work. The couple left at 10:20. Franco let the last busser go. Penny and Gina had already clocked out. The kitchen went quiet. It was just Franco, Marco, and me in the restaurant. Franco looked at me, then at Marco's table. Her then back at me with the particular expression of a man who had worked at Conti's for 30 years and understood every kind of silence the building contained. "I'll finish the close," he said to me. "Go." "Franco, you don't have to—" "Go, Cora." Not unkind, just done discussing it. I untied my apron, folded it over the wait station, walked to Marco's corner table, and sat down across from him, the way I had 100 times in imagination, and maybe 20 times in reality. Except this time felt like the first time that counted. He had 2 espresso cups on the table. He pushed one toward me. I pulled it close. Didn't drink it yet. "How's your arm?" he said. It was the question he'd asked me that first night. The same words, but it meant something completely different now, and we both knew it. "Healed," I said. "Completely." He nodded, and something in his face was open in the way it only got after close, in the quiet, the controlled surface down, the thing underneath visible. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Okay. When I caught you that first night, when I saw your arm—" He stopped, looked at the table for a moment. "I have seen a lot of things in my life that I couldn't do anything about. Things that were already done, already finished, no way to go back and change the shape of them." He looked up. "That wasn't going to be one of them. I decided that before you finished lying to me about falling." My chest was doing the complicated thing again. I let it. "You didn't know me," I said. "No." A pause. "But I know what it looks like when someone's been carrying something too long. And I know what it costs to keep carrying it." He held my gaze. "Yeah, you deserve to put it down." The candle between us was low, the same as it always was at this hour. A small, warm light in the big quiet of the empty restaurant. Outside, 4th Street was doing its late-night thing. Somewhere down the block, music from a bar, low and far away. "I read the article," I said. "The one about your father." "I know. And I thought about it for a long time." I kept my voice steady. About what it meant. About whether it changed things. He was very still. Listening. "It doesn't," I said. "Not the way whoever sent it wanted it to." I looked at him directly. "I'm not naive about what your family is. I'm not pretending I don't see the back room or know what handled means. I'm choosing to be here anyway." I paused. "But I need you to be straight with me. Always. Whatever's happening, I'd rather know than not know." "Yes," he said. No hesitation. "And I need what happened with Danny to be the last time something gets done on my behalf without me knowing about it first." "That's fair." He said it the way he always said fair things. Simply, like an acknowledgement rather than a concession. "Okay," I said. "Okay," he said. We looked at each other across the corner table. The candle. The 2 espresso cups. The empty restaurant settling into its night sounds. The refrigerator hum from the kitchen. The old building doing its old building breathing. "Tell me something true," I said. He almost smiled. "You first." I thought about it. What was true right now, in this specific moment, that I hadn't said out loud yet? "I haven't felt safe in a long time," I said. "Not in a place. Not with a person. I forgot what it felt like." I looked at my espresso cup. "I remember now." The room was very quiet. "Cora." His voice was low. I looked up. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not a declaration, not performed. Just a fact, stated plainly, by a man who didn't say things he didn't mean." My chest was full of the thing I'd been keeping at arm's length for weeks. I stopped keeping it. "I know," I said. And I did. I actually did. He reached across the table, set his hand on the table between us, open, palm up, not grabbing, just offering. I looked at it for a moment, then I put my hand in his. The candle burned. The restaurant breathed. Outside, the Hudson was doing what it always did, moving, cold, indifferent, and beautiful in the particular way of things that keep going no matter what happens on the shore. We stayed at the corner table until the candle went out. Neither of us was in a hurry. 3 seasons later, the window boxes at Conti's had Rosa's spring flowers in them when I walked in for my shift, and found a course catalog for Keene University's education program on the wait station, with a yellow sticky note on top. "Tuition's handled. Rosa's idea." I just agreed. No signature. He never signed things. Didn't need to. I picked up the catalog, held it for a moment. Franco appeared from the kitchen, took one look at my face, and went back the way he'd come without saying a word. That evening, after close, at the corner table with the low candle between us, I told Marco Conti that I was going back to school. He listened to every word. Then he pushed my espresso toward me and said, "Tell me something true." I smiled at him across the table. "I already did," I said.